all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you?
Boring. 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 Boring.
You got it work. Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that.
That's exactly what you're doing.
You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel.
I call again for the immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the return of the sausages, the hostages.
Another edition of Lembit Opik Live here on Unprecedented TV, where we find the facts, kill the spin, and tell it like it is all around the world. And I'm taking the unusual step of inviting a guest we had at the beginning of the week because of a rather important developing story, if you're watching this live, in Ukraine. Vladimir Zelensky, he's the professional clown who became commander-in-chief of one of the most disastrous military campaigns in European history, now says that he wants $1 billion a month to continue fighting the mighty Russian army, as well as entry into NATO. In other words, Vladimir Zelensky hasn't been paying attention. It's quite obvious, and I'll explain why in a moment, that this is an impossibility if he wants this war to end. However, Zelensky doesn't seem to have noticed this. As a result, we're getting something of a standoff in Ukraine, where what Zelensky wants, the professional comedian, isn't what Vladimir Putin, the professional politician, is willing to offer. This puts America in a little bit of a bind. Donald Trump doesn't want to look like he's throwing Zelensky in Ukraine to the wolves, but at the same time, he's very little toleration for fools. He clearly thinks that Zelensky is one of those fools, but he would also extend the same compliment to much of Europe. I don't think, in my opinion, that Starmer or Macron or Rutte, who's the very strange individual in charge of NATO, afford much credibility either. I'm not going to list everybody I'm not very impressed with in fourth division European politics, but Donald Trump does have to find a way through it. I was completely wrong when I thought, and I realize how naive this sounds now, dear viewer, I was completely wrong when I thought that Trump would actually get a cure, a solution to the Ukraine conflict in 24 hours like he promised. It looks ridiculous now, and my guest can have some solace and perhaps some self-satisfaction in having got this one right. But what does seem obvious, and I was right on this, is that there is no military victory in sight or ever possible for Zelensky. Ukraine cannot beat Russia. So the only question is, how much more does he want to lose before he gives Putin what he wants? Now, maybe you disagree. Maybe you think that that's not the way to look at it. Well, a person who we can now have on air is Warren Thornton, who's been pretty much right all the way through. Warren, thanks for joining us. And thanks for joining us twice in a week. But this is a developing story. Just in your view, what's the latest from Ukraine?
Well, the latest that we have is we were putting out the figures of 1.8 million dead, and a lot of people were turning around and saying, no, that's not the case. They were saying that it was a lot less, but they'd had 400,000 deserters. Now, we turned around and said that, of course, that our people are very, very good at this. And normally what the losing side do is they hide the amount of deaths or the huge losses behind desertions. And they always say, oh, this many people have deserted. So when he said 400,000 had deserted, alarm bells started going off, because normally the figure is around 50%. Of that. And of course, what can I tell you? We've got the figures, and the figures, of course, bear that out, Ukraine and from obviously the Russians. Now, there's 1.8 million dead. This new figure now takes it over 2 million we are saying are dead, 2.7 million killed and injured. Now, they released the figures and instead of the 400,000, there are 202,997 that have deserted. So the rest are missing, and they, of course, will be dead. And pretty much, as our guys who have been at this for 30 years, Lembit, they're bang on the money. They're literally 2,000 out of 400,000 soldiers that Ukraine said were missing, but in actual fact, only 202,000 are missing. 202,000, sorry, are deserted. The rest are dead.
So, in other words, these graveyards, over 200 of which have been opened in recent times in Ukraine, these graveyards are laden with the terrible military judgment of Zelensky, who is directly responsible, let's not pretend, who's directly responsible for running the Ukraine side of this war. Now, of course, he's a puppet, in my view, at least, to the West, but he's either the democratically elected leader of Ukraine or he's not. Now, that in itself is a different discussion. But the longer that he runs this, the more people die. But just before we go into that, if only 200,000 people have deserted, then the only way that you can add up the numbers is by adding 200,000 to the death list.
Yes. Yeah, and this is what they do in situations all around the world. Very simply, what happens is the losing side try to hide that number. And we literally, we're about months before these figures were published, we're going, this 400,000 that they've released is a lie. It will be about 50%. And that is pretty much exactly, I think it's like 50.8% is, are people that are actually, have actually gone AWOL and are not indeed, should we say. The horrible thing is, of course, the money that he would have to pay out as well, Lembit, because remember that they have to pay $328,000 for every single serviceman who's dead. So they've been stuffing these people into ovens, into mass graves out in fields and everything else. And the true death toll of anything like this, and of course our people were right when they were talking about Sierra Leone, they were right about Iraq, though they've been right on so many occasions ever since the mid-90s. They've been getting this figure right, and everybody's been decrying them and saying, no, this can't be the figure. It's far too high. These guys know what they're talking about. Literally, they say for every 2 bodies that are found, there is one that is still missing. And of course, there is one that's either been blown apart, has been buried in a mass grave, or indeed, as the Ukrainians have been doing, burning them in these 4 ovens set all around Ukraine. And there is actually a document out there that we've seen that said that BlackRock suggested to Ukraine to dispose of the bodies in this way.
It'd be very interesting to see that document at some point. It's a very heady allegation. I'm not saying you're wrong, but if that's true, then BlackRock, which is one of the largest financial institutions in the world, and not one you necessarily will have heard of, because they don't tend to advertise on television, but that would rather suggest that what you said in the past, Warren Thornton, about BlackRock's financial interest in Ukraine is right. So there's a whole different debate to be had there. I'm not saying that you're right, Warren, but I if you are. Now, we saw this this story developing as part of it. Ukraine seeks $1 billion a month for US weapons purchases. Apparently, Zelensky says this is from a Ukrainian news outlet. But $1 billion won't make any difference, will it? No, it's tiny compared to what they're squandering at the moment.
Yes, it won't make any difference at all, Lembit. And the reason it won't make any difference is, let's put it this way, they don't have enough men. They've got no matter what weapons go to them, they won't be able to fire those weapons. And that is a major, major problem. Well, they won't have the men to be able to carry it out for a kickoff. And that is a major, major problem, isn't it? When you don't have enough people to be able to fire and be able to use all sorts of crazy things like that. It is something that you look at and you go, how bad is this going to get? And the answer to the question is, you haven't got enough weapons, you can't make them fast enough, and more people are just going to die on the battlefield. This is as wrong as it gets.
Yeah, now, in this terms of this billion, as far as I understand it, it costs about $500 million a day, or $1/3 of $1 billion a day for Zelensky to throw his now conscripts and 60 to 65-year-olds into the front line. So if he got $1 billion a month, at best, that would give him 3 days of military activity. What's he do for the other 27?
Sorry, we froze up there for a second.
What I'm saying to you, no problem. I'm saying if he got $1 billion a month, that would buy 3 days of combat at best. And that's assuming there isn't any robbery of the money, embezzlement or selling of the weapons onto the illegal arms trade. We know all of that's happening, of course, in Ukraine. So if he gets $1 billion a month, what does he do for the other 27 days of the month?
Yeah, exactly. And it's the same with the shells, Lembit, because Russia are able to fire 20 shells for every one that Ukraine fire. And of course, when it comes to artillery shells, you've got 20 times more the chance of hitting people. And that's borne out in the numbers where, of course, Ukraine started out fairly level, and then it went about 6 Ukrainians for every Russian dying. Then it went to 10, then it went to 12, then it went to 16, and now it's gone well over 20. So, of course, this is getting worse and worse and worse. The drones are not working properly. The Russians are hitting all the Ukrainian drone factories, and this, of course, is impacting everything on the battlefield. And it's on the battlefield where the war of words and the PR and the nonsense that's coming out from Europe and from America, let's not forget, they started this war, and now they're trying to make out as though there's some sort of peacemaker here. What they're trying to do is get away so that they can go and deal with Iran. But they're trying to back out of this.
Yeah,
they did the same thing in Korea, Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq, you name it. When it starts to go wrong, the Americans just tend to drift off somewhere else.
By the way, just for viewers, Warren is experiencing a power cut over there in the Philippines, which is why you look strangely still, but your sound is okay. So let's continue. My producer says that's going to be fine. Suddenly you'll start moving again. You mentioned the war of words. I want to share with you the ludicrous, idiotic position taken by Keir Starmer, who is the massively beleaguered British Prime Minister, when he was basically giving unbridled support for Zelensky, despite the fact that everyone can see that Zelensky's war effort is collapsing around his knees. Let's watch this.
You're very, very welcome here in Downing Street. As you heard from the cheers on the street outside, you have full backing across the United Kingdom. And we stand with you, with Ukraine, for as long as it may take. And I hope you heard some of that cheering in the street. That is the people of the United Kingdom coming out to demonstrate how much they support you, how much they support Ukraine, and our absolute determination to stand with you, unwavering determination, and to achieve what we both want to achieve, which is a lasting peace for Ukraine based on sovereignty and security for Ukraine. So important for Ukraine, so important for Europe, and so important for the United Kingdom. So I'm much looking forward to our discussions here this afternoon. Thank you very much for making.
Now, the problem with this is when he said that, it made me so angry. I remember I was actually on your show at the time, it's ages ago. I did a poll on X asking the public if they did give him, that's Zelensky, their unequivocal support. It was a close vote. I suspect a lot of bots were involved. But over 40,000 people cast a decision, and by a slim majority, the people who voted said no.
Yes.
They said, no, we don't give you unbridled support. And as far as I can see, Starmer's still regurgitating the same nonsense, including all that utter claptrap about coalition of the willing. But actually, all he's doing is sponsoring the killing fields of Ukraine, where Russia just makes advances to get what Putin wants, either by peace or by war. Sorry, Warren, go ahead.
Well, you're absolutely right. And you're right to be annoyed when Starmer says we stand alongside you or we're right behind you. Yeah, we're right behind you, about 3,000 miles behind you. There's absolutely no intention whatsoever. This renter crowd that they get to go and cheer outside Downing Street is fooling nobody. Nobody is going to go and fight for Starmer. Everybody says, oh, the coalition of the willing, boots on the ground. They won't go boots on the ground unless America go full on into Ukraine with air, or they will have to have boots as well, which is kind of crazy. And of course, everybody turns around and says that this is going to be an okay thing. Everybody's going to do this. We're going to have security actions. You're not going to have any security guarantees at all, because Russia are not going to agree to the nonsense that you want to come out with. If there is a peace deal, they will certainly veto that. So therefore, they will turn around and say there can be no peace deal. And what will happen, and of course they're saying for as long as it takes. Well, let me tell you, Keir Starmer, the current rate of the Ukrainians that are dying is August next year. You will be able to you will not be able to defend anywhere near the front line. In fact, you will have to pull back to either defend Kiev or Lvov. You won't have enough troops left to defend anywhere of the 9 oblasts that, of course, I think that Putin wants to take.
And on that point, Vladimir Putin is endlessly criticized in the mainstream media in the West for not making concessions, for not softening his position. But as far as I recall, you can correct me if I'm wrong, he only wants 3 things. He's only ever wanted 3 things. It was those 3 things that caused him to invade in the first place. The 3 things are no NATO membership for Ukraine, no militarization of Ukraine, and no Nazification of Ukraine. Now, it seems to me on the last one, the denazification of Ukraine, if it's not Nazified, they can easily agree it. If it is, they should agree it as well. In terms of NATO, that was a promise made 35 years ago by James Baker on behalf of the United States, that not 1 inch to the east with the NATO organization drift. They've clearly broken that time and again. And in terms of militarization of Ukraine, well, it's predicated on the fact that they lied on the second one. So it doesn't seem unreasonable to me that Vladimir Putin doesn't change his position.
No, exactly that. Let's be absolutely clear here. When they talk about this absolute nonsense when it comes to Zelensky and everything else, let's be absolutely straight here. Vladimir Putin is winning. The winners get to decide what happens. You can't be losing. If you're losing 3-0 with 5 minutes to go in a football game, you can't suddenly go, next goal wins. That's not how it works. If you're losing, you get whatever they decide to give you. And if they decide, you have either obliteration or negotiation. And the side that's losing has to give up quite a lot of, obviously, whether that be money, whether that be area, land area or whatever. And on top of that, Lembit, the thing that you were saying there, they're quite happy to talk about NATO and no going into NATO. But of course, they're still edging around that, saying no NATO for now. It's not on the table at the moment. And of course, Mark Rutte has turned around and said there is an irreversible path to NATO for Ukraine. Well, that's nonsense. That's first of all, that's to keep Ukraine fighting because they think, oh, NATO will eventually come to our rescue. No, they won't. And it's the other thing as well. We're talking about demilitarization. That's probably going to be one of the things that is the easiest to do. And the hardest thing, as you were saying, Lembit, is the denazification. Now, they have Azov battalions, they have in schools, they have, pretty much the same thing as we had in Germany in the 1930s. There is indoctrination left, right and center going on. And if you've ever noticed with Sersky, who is the closest possible advisor, of course, to Zelensky, you will notice on his shoulder patch are 2 cross grenades. Now, those are the cross grenades of the Derwanger SS battalion. So please don't tell me there are no Nazis in Ukraine and that this isn't a huge problem. And America and the European Union won't even discuss it, won't even admit it. So until they do, we're not going to have any peace.
Yeah, interesting you should say that. After we just share, this is my shameless attempt at promoting some of the other shows we have here. After we have a little reminder of some of the other shows, we have to update this, by the way, because we've got so many more shows since we made it. I want to go back to what Are You Okay? Asks in X, a rather challenging question to you and particularly to me. about why we don't give the same scrutiny to Vladimir Putin. But first of all, a quick reminder of some of the other shows we have here on Unprecedented TV.
Yeah.
We need to update that because we've got a whole bunch more shows, actually, including yours, Warren Thornton. I think we've settled on 11 a.m. British summertime for yours, but we'll have a chat about that. So much work, so little time. I promised to get involved with the chat, and that's what we'll do. Are you okay? Says, as the invader, it's a shame you don't give the same scrutiny to Putin, Lemmy. Lemmy, it's a term of endearment. Let's deal with Are You OK's point. I'm guessing Are You OK feels that Vladimir Putin might be more culpable than I feel he is.
Okay.
What would you say? What would you say there about the fact that it was Vladimir Putin who crossed the border into Ukraine?
Yes, he did. And he was basically pushed into it. Let me explain to you exactly how that came about. Now, at 3 peace conferences, including the Budapest Memorandum and twice at Minsk, literally the Russians turned around, and it's not what you think; it's what the Russians feel. Let me get that point across there. And they turned around and said they see if the NATO go into Ukraine, then they see that as an existential threat. And do remember that if they place missiles then in Ukraine, they're only 3 minutes away from Moscow. How would you feel if they put that, should we say, in Belgium, pointing at Paris, or they put it on the Orkney Islands, pointing at London, or indeed they put it in Alaska, pointing at America? And of course, America had a meltdown in 1963 about that very thing in Cuba. So Putin, they just kept pushing and pushing and pushing. Putin kept warning and warning and warning. And then eventually, you have to remember also that in 2014, when the Americans overthrew the normal democratic Ukrainian government that was in power then, and they were getting along absolutely fine, no problems whatsoever. And then the Americans decided it was time for regime change because they didn't want to take the IMF loan, which would have put them in economic slavery. And then they stormed the parliament. Victoria Nuland, the National Endowment for Democracy, were actually in the Maidan Square. Of course, this thing always starts like this. Romania, and now Georgia, where you have peaceful protest, turns violent, somebody ends up getting killed. Next thing you know, there's a call for everybody to go in there and rescue that country. Freedom and democracy, you have to visit it before it comes to visit you. Here's the problem that we have. They just kept pushing and pushing Putin. And remember that in the eastern Donbass, where there were ethnic Russians, they killed over 14,000 of those since 2014, long before Russia went in February of 2022. So when we try to give Zelensky some sort of, should we say, free pass here, there is no free pass to this. And before we try to polish Zelensky's laurels, remember that they are now mobilizing 60-year-old men, citizens, civilians, being thrown onto the front line. And these people, for many, many months, in fact, for the last 2 years, have been grabbed and thrown into vans and thrown onto the front line. When you are doing that to the people of your country, you have lost the war already.
Now, yes, just to be clear then, they really are conscripting 60-year-olds? Or are they opening, they're literally forcing 60-year-olds to go to war?
Yes, they passed a bill through Parliament last month saying that they could mobilise over 60.
I'm 60. I wouldn't be much use on the front line. I'm not much use going up to the co-op, which, if you're watching internationally, is a very nice local shop chain. Well, so you've got 60-year-olds on the front line fighting 25-year-old Russian troops and drones.
You see, this is the problem you have when you get. You have to remember that many people are surrendering when they get to the front line, and they also have barrier troops. And I've shown videos, Lembit, you know, that we do on our channel. We've shown videos of these barrier troops, which are mercenary soldiers. When they throw these guys onto the front line, if they get overwhelmed, they start to retreat. The barrier troops of Ukraine are shooting at their own citizens. Now, when you're doing that and you're beating people up, do you think Zelensky deserves plaudits?
Well, this is why the military meltdown seems to be an appropriate way of describing what we're looking at today. And let's come up to the present day. I recognize that if you're watching it from the archive, this is very real, very present, very today, but sometimes we have to do that. Another headline that I've seen is this: Ukraine-Russia war latest, children among 10 killed in massive Russian drone and missile attack on Kiev. My interpretation here is that Vladimir Putin said very clearly to Donald Trump in a recent meeting between the two in Alaska, this is what I want. And if you give me what I want, I'll stop the fighting. But the inference was, if you don't give me what I want, I'll fight for it and I'll get it. And either way, as far as I can tell, Warren, Vladimir Putin will get the new border that he wants to give himself a buffer zone between a militarized Ukraine and Russia.
Yes, absolutely. And one should avoid taking anything that is supplied by Kiev whatsoever. I mean, they've lied consistently about it. And do remember that, yes, there are children that get casualties of war, but Russia deliberately try not to hit civilians if they can help it. Now, you've only got to go online and look at the massive amount of drones that the Ukrainians have fired at Russia. And, of course, the terrorist attacks into Kursk and also into Belgorod as well. They had to, and of course, 2014, you've only got to go and look at the Human Rights Watch. They've documented over 14,000 cases before Russia even went in of Ukrainians killing ethnic Russians. And please go and research the Alley of the Angels in the Donbass. In 2015, there were ethnic Russians who wanted to be part of Russia. They were holding a referendum. They had literally in a place called Zugrez, these ethnic Russians were on the beach. They were living in Ukraine, ethnic Russians in the eastern Donbass. They waited until the holiday. Ukraine dropped cluster bombs on a beach full of tourists. And they waited till the holiday to do that. So when you see this sort of thing in there, the propaganda is one of those things where you look at it and you go, take anything that the Daily Telegraph or the Western media say with a pinch of salt. I would suggest going online and finding the videos. The videos are out there, but of course the West don't want us to see this. But Ukraine are not above killing what they consider. It's rather a bit like Gaza. They don't consider ethnic Russians as humans, so therefore they don't have a problem with disposing of them.
Finishing up on this, and thank you, you've been generous through the time. We've gone a bit longer than I intended, actually. But it seems to me that there is no way out for Volodymyr Zelensky here. He obviously cannot win, despite the frankly stupid comments of Keir Starmer, his ludicrous concept of a coalition of the willing, and the deranged attitude of people like Mark Rutte, who thinks lethal force, an increase in lethal force in NATO will stop Russia. So Volodymyr Zelensky cannot win. He cannot win militarily. No. What is driving the European obsession with pouring more and more money into Ukraine, which is running out of people to put on the front line, and which is clearly walking backwards and giving the land which Vladimir Putin wants to Vladimir Putin?
Yeah, well, very, very simply, they followed the Americans into battle. They gave all their weapons. They gave everything they had. They literally gave lots and lots of money, put themselves in huge debt. The GDP of all these countries, if you put Germany, France and Great Britain together, the GDP of those three countries isn't anywhere near as high as the GDP of Russia. Sanctions don't work. What they did was cause all sorts of problems. Please remember this. I'm not a lover of Russia at all. But please remember this. There are three types of people that win a war: politicians, arms dealers, and bankers. The rest, everybody else pays. They either pay in blood or they pay economically. Now, Germany's literally, their economy is in the toilet. They're in a huge recession. France are the same. Great Britain are the same. Just remember that in Great Britain, they took money off old people to let them freeze in winter, the winter payments allowance, while keeping their own winter payments, the members of parliament, so that they could give more money to Ukraine. This is quite, and of course they have to keep this war going, Lembit, because the only thing that's propping them up at the moment is the money they're spending on military hardware that's actually generating some sort of economic growth, shall we say? Because literally they're in all sorts of problems, and BRICS is here to stay. And remember that the BRICS system, Lembit, was created so that when they did have sanctions on them, when America did place sanctions and the EU did place sanctions, people had an alternative system of payments that they could use. It's not to challenge the dollar, it's to circumnavigate when they use these tariffs and these sanctions to try and cripple other countries' economies.
I would say that Zelensky's war performance is about as successful as your internet connection today, Warren, but fair play to you. I know you've had a total power cut. You're on auxiliary power over there in the Philippines. Just before we go, a comment from Dr. Liliana Correda. Ukrainian journalist Diana Panchenko discusses NATO's instigation of this war. Zelensky et al. Embezzlement of $200 billion, his dictatorship, no free speech, forced conscription, CAPT. Your view?
Dr. Lillian is absolutely right there. I mean, you have to remember that through various proxies, Vladimir Zelensky owns £400 million worth of properties just in London alone, and there are properties all around the world. But you also have to remember that the Ukrainian parliament has got its hand out.
Has that been proved?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. If you go and look at his Jewish lawyer, trying to remember the name, it escapes me off the top of my head. But they have 4 or 5 dummy companies that the money goes through. And it's not uncommon knowledge if you go and look for it. And of course, the other thing about this is you must remember that, of course, many of the people in the parliament, their own children aren't going on to the front line. Vladimir Klitschko's children live in Germany. And of course, they were born at Mount Sinai Hospital, of course, in America. So many of these, Rustem Umarov's daughter is currently living in Florida. He's was the defense minister. So none of the actual Ukrainian parliament or the top military people, their children are not on the front line. They are safely domiciled in other areas and doing very well for themselves, Lembit. And just remember that Zelensky's wife has a Bugatti Veyron.
Just in terms of what you're saying about the property portfolio and Zelensky's wealth, I've been trying to look into this. I can't say, I'm not saying you're wrong. I can't say I've been able to confirm it. I spent a lot of time trying to work out 2 things: how much Zelensky is worth, and it's a huge amount considering his meager salary in his job. And secondly, where did he get it from? Very difficult to figure that out. Now, you've said a figure, and on another time, I'll just say to the viewers and to you, Vladimir Zelensky, we will look at the figures. And frankly, if you're worth the kind of money that Warren Thornton says you're worth, I think you owe the world an explanation, because it doesn't look good if you have those kinds of funds and you were trying to stop a independent corruption investigation in Ukraine. I'm not saying you're guilty, Vladimir, but you are guilty of trying to take control of the independent investigations. So much so that even your allies complained about that. Finishing off then, because we're almost out of time. Dr. Liliana Correda says 100%. So there seems to be an agreement between you and her there. Where do you think this goes over the next few days? And once again, if you're watching it in the archive, then you'll know if this is right or wrong. But what happens the next few days? Is there any sign at all of a reversal of fortunes for Vladimir Zelensky, or are things looking as bad as they seem?
No, let's be absolutely straight. The Ukrainians have penetrated Kupiansk up to the north, and they're starting to surround that. So Kupiansk.
So, Ukrainians or Russians?
Sorry, the Russians are literally surrounding the Ukrainians in Kupiansk. They've also done the same in Pokrovsk, where they've fallen back. The Azov battalion, which are the neo-Nazis, have gone in there, thinking, great, we're pushing the Russians back, and they've walked into basically a killing field. And what the Russians do is they make almost a cauldron. It's like a bowl with an opening. And of course, those people just keep flooding into the bottom of the bowl, and they keep getting slaughtered. This is happening in Pokrovsk. This is also happening just up the road in Konstantinivka. Siversky is the same. And of course, in Kupiansk, the same thing is happening. And of course, we're talking about, they're getting slaughtered left, right, and center. And what you have to remember is once they get past that trench line, literally in the Donbass is over. And all that huge trench line that they have along the mining communities and all those, shall we say, towns, villages, and cities that they have in that trench line. Once they get beyond that, there's very little to stop them going another 80 kilometers after that without too much resistance.
Thank you for joining us twice this week, but it is a developing story. Where can we get more of Warren Thornton?
Well, we run a show on Monday to Friday, 6 p.m. To 8 p.m. Sometimes it goes on longer, which is a news show. We don't just cover that, but we do cover other topics as well. But we do, because of our contacts, of course, we do cover the war quite a lot. And then on Sunday nights, of course, we are joined by the wonderful Lembit Opik between 7 p.m. and 9 p.m.
And on top of that, really from now onwards, we get 1 hour of that 2 hours here on Unprecedented TV. You'll have to go to the paywall and to Warren Thornton's site to get it live and get the full 2 hours. But we've been working. There's been some fairly big technical challenges to do this, but I think we've got them licked now. So from 11 till 12, British summertime, you get the first hour of Warren Thornton's most recent show. Warren, thanks very much indeed for joining us, and well done on surviving on auxiliary power over there in the Philippines. What's causing the power cut?
At the moment, we've got the back end of a typhoon, which of course is causing huge thunder and lightning and rain as well. And can I just say thank you very much? It's always nice to be challenged in the chat with questions. So that's always quite a nice thing. To be able to give the answers to people, and also to enlighten people on what's really going on.
I'll just, in response to that, Dr. Correda says, Ukraine, the most corrupt country on earth. Funny that he dismembered the anti-corruption agency. Yesterday, the new reassembled anti-corruption leaders went to Brussels to meet with their sponsors. And thank you, Warren. Thank you, Lembit. You're welcome, Doctor. Yes. And thanks for the chat. We're getting the hang of this broadcasting thing. It's only taken me 40 years. There we go. And thank you for having your auxiliary power. I hope you haven't used it all up. I hope your toilet still flushes and your lights will come on. That is Warren Thornton. Thank you very much for joining us. Fascinating to hear this developing story. If you are in the archive, you'll see a whole set of programs there. Too many to mention. And thank you if you subscribe. My final request, please go to Unprecedented TV. If you can't find it, put Unprecedented TV Lembit, and then you should find it very easily, or Unprecedented TV YouTube Lembit. Put those words together, you'll get straight to our site. Our numbers are going up fast, and I'm really grateful for your support. That is it for me today. Thanks to the team. And more than anything, thanks for Warren for struggling through. He had a power cut about 3 minutes before we came on air. So the picture may not have been great, but it's a miracle that he and I are about 12,000 kilometers apart, but we're still able to have that conversation. And somewhere in between is Ukraine. I'm Lembit Opik. That was Lembit Opik Live here on Unprecedented TV. I'll see you soon.
This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you?
Boring. 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 Boring.
You got it work. Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that.
That's exactly what you're doing.
You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel.
I call again for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the return of the sausages, the hostages,